Welcome to Lombardi Live. It's Tuesday at 5. Thank you for joining us today. This is a unique show. It's a little bit different. It's breaking news. We've never done this before. In fact, we should have a breaking news banner, Antoine, when we repost this. Put breaking news right across, right now. What's strange about today's show, which is going to be really entertaining and educational for you, we're not interviewing a drummer, but I'm interviewing a man who has played with some of the best drummers in the world, and you're going to kind of get an insight from the other band members' perspective of what you need to do to improve your playing and what might help you get the gig. Think about guys like Vinnie Colaiuta, Steve Gadd, Steve Jordan, Greg Bissonette, Gary Novak, Abe Laboriel Jr., Oscar Seaton, Jimmy Brantley, the list goes on, and I'm going on and on. Ricky Lawson, Kurt Pescara, John Ferraro, Bernard Purdie, Chad Wackerman, J.R. Robinson, this is just to name a few. They've all played with a man who is outside the box, and you're going to find out a little bit more about that. He's a producer, arranger, great keyboard player, David Garfield. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Don. It's so great to be here again.
It's going to be an honor for us. Thinking of time feels. Some drummers are kind of known for playing a little bit back, a little bit ahead, or some can do both. But within a particular song that you have, and you're looking at like, who would I like to have come in and be the drummer on this track? What are you thinking of in your mind that you might think of this type of a guy, that guy?
I have some great stories for you. You've just triggered a memory. You know, the great Steve Jordan, you know, a guy everybody knows. He's with the Rolling Stones now, and I hear he's doing a great job on that gig. You know, I was 19 years old. I think he was 18 or 19. We played a show together in the East Coast with opposite bands, and I noticed him, and I said, oh, I like this guy. Who is this guy? You know, I keep an eye on him all these years, but I wanted to record with him. We got him finally to record, and in his busy schedule, the day opened up, and we went down to Capitol Studios to record with him. And he didn't want to use a click. It was a complete surprise, because I always use a click on my sessions, especially with Pro Tools these days. And so we had to roll with it, you know, and he had a great natural feel. You know, it was the first time I got to work with him in the studio and record with him, and we had a great time. He did an incredible job, but you know, I'll tell you a couple quick things. You know, we're talking about time feels, and the click is something that can be quite controversial. You know, for years and years, we didn't use clicks in the studio. And then some people started using them so they could edit, and then eventually with Pro Tools, we need to use clicks. But see, there's an art to playing with the click. And see, the great drummers will use the click as their reference, but they'll put it where it feels good. And just being mechanical and machine-like isn't going to feel good. So, you know, I think, you know, each drummer has their own unique feel. If it feels good, it's easy to play with. And you take a guy like J.R. Robinson or, you know, Steve Ferroni or Jim Keltner. They all have their unique feel and where they put the time, but it's not the same. But if it feels good, it's equally good.
Speaking of the click or no click, a lot of the classic tracks that we grew up to tended to speed up a little bit.
Have you heard Chameleon, Herbie Hancock with Harvey Mason? Wonderful track. And it's almost double time near the end of the thing, you know.
Yeah, I've recently interviewed David Foster and some of the Earth, Wind & Fire track. In fact, he recalled, I think it was him, he was a keyboard player, I believe, went in and said to the engineer, you know, we'll probably have to do it again. It sped up a lot. And the engineer said, no, it felt great.
See, that's the thing about Chameleon. And I didn't mean that to sound as a criticism. The thing about Chameleon was one of my favorite tracks. The fact that it sped up, because it evolved, you know, went through a lot of different cycles. But I remember when I first heard Harvey Mason, it blew my mind, you know. And this is, now something you should know is I was a drummer through high school in the stage band, and
it comes out in your playing. Thus you're at Drum Channel, right?
Well, that's one of the reasons I got along so well with, you know, Carlos Vega and Jeff Porcaro particularly, and then of course all the other drummers that I become friends with, Greg Bissonette, Steve Ferroni. But originally when I played with Jeff, he liked playing with me because of my steadiness, because I had more of a drum background, whereas a lot of keyboard players that have a keyboard background tend to flow a lot and kind of, they're not too gridded, you know. And now we did some great playing without the clicks. I was one of the guys that didn't like clicks in the beginning, and some drummers I worked with wanted to use the click to steady the time. And I said, I don't mind using the click, but I don't want you to play to the click. I'd rather we played to you as a band than have you play to the click. And I got into some, you know, discussions, borderline arguments with some of my drummers about that. And I would say, well, let's just play it with the click over and over and rehearse it, and then when we're going to record, let's turn off the click. But eventually, click became the thing for editing and everything. But the thing is, a live drummer, to me, there's nothing like it. And, you know, I've been so spoiled, got to play with such great guys. You know, just a quick story talking about, you know, we're talking about Jeff Porcaro and guys like him. They just had such a great natural feel that we did a show in Germany one year. It was a tribute to Jeff Porcaro's show, and I had Steve Gadd and Greg Bissonette playing together. We did the song Africa, and it was live. There was no clicks or anything. And then later I wanted to mix it, and we did release it on the Mike Porcaro CD that we produced called Brotherly Love. But when we were mixing that record, my engineer flew in the original Toto track into the session so he could compare it, and an uncanny thing happened. Our live version with Gadd and Bissonette lined up with it and never budged.
Amazing.
That was quite interesting. I think Greg had the click of the record and used it to start it off. So they were on the same click. But I think him and Gadd were so solid, and they had Lenny Castro with them, that they just put a thing down, didn't budge.
When you have one of the songs that you've written, you have it played in the studio and then you play it live. Is there a difference between the way a drummer might approach it, or what you're looking for a drummer to do in the studio as opposed to playing live?
Yeah, when we play live, you know, things tend to pick up. And then sometimes what happens is some drummers think things will slow down because they're trying not to pick up. It's quite an interesting thing. And I know all the great drummers have worked at not rushing, because it's the excitement of the moment. You get into it. And I'll do a thing at the end of the song where I'll retard, you know, and I'll slow down the band. And very frequently at rehearsals, I'll go to slow down and I'll have my hands up, and I haven't come down, and the drummer will hit. And I'll just look at him and smile. I said, I haven't put my hands down yet. There's an anticipatory thing that happens. So you get up on the edge a little bit. But I think sometimes live, quite honestly, they should be faster tempos, maybe a little bit. We had a rehearsal yesterday for my show tomorrow, and we were playing one song, and the singer said, it feels a little slow. And so I realized that, you know, for live, things will tend to be, I think they'll tend to be a little bit faster.
In my younger playing days, my mantra was, yes, maybe I sped up, but when the lead singer comes back in, if it doesn't sound like she's on helium, I'm okay.
Exactly. Another thing I wanted to tell you about picking up the tempo live is I have an arrangement of Layla that I've done, and you know, I think Greg's used it, and I think a few other drummers in their clinics live and everything, but it's done at a certain tempo. There's some figures for the horn players that are quite challenging, and if it picks up too much speed, it's impossible. And we'll do it at our gigs, you know, when I'll start it out in a nice place and I'll feel it picking up, and I'll be getting worried, because I know when it comes time for that particular spot, we've had some tragedies with that a couple of times, but you know.
That's the fun part of being there live, though, at the same time. And your recording career, I mean, looking back at all the great people that you've played with, the diverse group of genres of people you've played with, any particular memorable moments with Smokey or back in the day?
Well, you know, you mentioned Smokey Robinson. Smokey's a guy that I got to connect with more recently when he wanted to go in the studio and record, and he wanted somebody fresh to go in and help him do it. And they interviewed people, and I interviewed with them. And I went down to Third Encore, and I went to the room, and he said, I want to work on a song, Michael Jackson's song that Berry Gordy wrote, and do a newer version of it. And he goes, it's called I Want You Back. And he goes, you remember that? And I had a brain lock. my brain shut down. I couldn't remember. I had no idea what he was talking about, and I couldn't assess it in my head. And then I finally pulled it up on the phone or something, but he wanted to do something different with it, and I came up with these really crazy chords and everything, and a whole different groove, like, you know. And at the end of the thing, he said, "Well, that's great to meet you." And I left the place, and I thought, I'll never hear from this guy again, because I totally blew it. I didn't wow him. I didn't even know the song. What I did was mediocre. And 15 minutes later in the car, the phone rang. It was his production manager. Said, "Smokey wants to hire you to work on his records." So you never know when you go into an audition how you did till you get that call. And so I started recording with them, and I brought in a great section. That's when Ricky Lawson was still alive. And Ricky's uncle was Paul Reiser, who was a legendary Motown arranger, did all the great string arrangements in Motown, and Ricky was great chemistry. So that's the thing. In my job, I am like a casting director. I got to pull in the right people to work with the artist. And you know, Ricky Lawson, you know, was one of my friends. He was a great drummer. We lost him several years ago, but brought him in with Smokey and some other great musicians, and we had a ball recording with him. I'll tell you another great story, though. You talk about a great drummer story. I got to play with the great Art Blakey once.
Wow.
You know? And now as a kid, I was a huge fan of the Jazz Messengers. And I love the way he played with mallets. And if anybody hasn't heard of Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, check it out, because this is from way back in the day, 40s and 50s. You know, he's an old-timer, no longer with us. Well, I was in New York playing with Freddie Hubbard at the Village Gate, and Art Blakey came, and the fact that they were there together, it was so exciting. And Freddie brought him up on stage to play, and I'm going to play with Freddie Hubbard and Art Blakey in New York and the Village Gate, and I'm so excited. And Art comes up to the drums, and it's like the best moment of my life. And he looks at me and goes, "Whoa!" I had no idea what he said. He called off a song and started playing, and I didn't know what song it was, and I was sitting there horrified. That's my art. But I figured out, I started playing, you know. But that was my great Art Blakey story.
Art Blakey, the master of the crush roll when you see him play. That's what drummers knew him for. He had that down. That roll was just like a freight train coming through town.
Oh, yeah. Did you remember the song Blues March?
Oh, yeah.
And you know, there was a great African drummer named Tony Allen who did a whole African Art Blakey tribute thing a few years ago, and it's worth checking out.
Another drummer that you might not be aware of that was a dear friend of ours, Carlos Vega. Somebody that you should try and check out for sure.
Carlos was my best friend, and we started our band together, Charisma, in 1975. And you know, he studied with Ralph Humphrey and Joe Porcaro, and I'm sure I met you through Carlos.
Yeah,
back in the day.
Yep.
And Carlos, he was Jeff Porcaro's protege. You know, he was just a year and a half younger, and he played with Jeff's brothers, and he was just a wonderful drummer. Played on so many great records, a lot of hit records. You may have heard Olivia Newton-John, Physical, or Magic. A song called Maniac, that was the big Flashdance. He was really wonderful guy to work with. And here's a great story. So Carlos really played all styles, you know.
No question.
He could play jazz. There's a video of us playing with Freddie Hubbard. Incredible jazz. He could play Latin, salsa, great Brazilian, could play rock, soul, everything. And that was the key, to be versatile, to be a working musician in our era. You had to be versatile and play a lot of different styles of music. And
still important today, I think, for sure.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, we've been in an era, you know, last couple decades where a lot of people have come up with a lot of facility on their drums, and they can do a lot of incredible stuff, you know. And that's wonderful. I mean, it's great I love to incorporate that into the music. But the guys that I was so privileged to work with and learn from, you know, their art was in playing less. They knew how to play, you know, just the minimum and edit themselves.
Young drummers, your opinion, they've been practicing at home, they've been studying, taking some private lessons, and they have the first chance to sit in with a band. And they're, of course, nervous, but What advice would you give them that would be like the main thing they should be thinking of in that situation?
Hold down the groove. Be a support for your band. The band relies on you to keep the time going and mark, to count off the song at the right tempo, to make sure they know exactly where they start. We had a thing yesterday in rehearsal. There's a spot in the song with an extra bar. It's a 9-bar phrase. And we had a new singer singing the first time. She had to come back in with the verse. And I said to the drummer, I says, give her a strong guide, give her like a ba ba doom boom. So there's no question. And you're marking the song, you're supporting the group, and don't try to show off, because there's nothing that I think rubs people the wrong way more than a drummer that's trying to show off too much.
It has to be for the song, has to be for the music.
Yeah. And I say that because when I was 15, 16 years old and I played the drums, I was a show-off.
Well, every drummer does and should go through that. Yeah. I think that's part of
Look what I can do. Look what I can do. But we talk about some of these guys like Vinnie Colaiuta, who...
Not that there's many guys like Vinnie Colaiuta, but I know what you mean.
Well, Vinnie, I had the pleasure of getting to know him when we were both very young, and 21 years old. And, he had tremendous facility, to vocabulary and everything. But he learned how to do the same thing, and we always have this joke with Vinnie. When we see each other, we always go, drum solo, drum solo. It's just a joke we have with each other, but he never really particularly liked to take solos and stuff. On the record there's a song actually called Cousin Vinny.
Speaking of that, this is Stretchin' Outside the Box. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this is my most recent CD, part of a 6-CD series called Outside the Box. And we've been recording since 2015. We just finished releasing the 6th of 6 CDs. And it's just a body of work. And, the original idea was I wanted to record with some of the masters, both engineers and musicians and artists that I've had the privilege of knowing. I was working with George Benson at the time as musical director. I've always wanted to get George to come in and play on one of my records. So we got him in on this. I write with Smokey and I produce with Smokey, and I've written a couple songs with him. I wanted to record those songs and get Smokey to sing. Just had a lot of ideas. I wanted to work with Steve Jordan. I wanted to record with Jim Keltner some more. We had some great recordings with Jim on this, and the bottom line is if you check it out and you read about it online, you'll see there's a lot of information. There's a lot of people involved.
And then the other ones, including Tony. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you're talking about the tribute to Tony Williams?
Tribute to Tony Williams.
Well, so a few years ago, as I say, maybe even 20 years ago, I recorded a tribute to Tony Williams with Greg Bissonette and Vinnie Colaiuta playing together in a special coordinated, one drum part split by 2 drummers. And we decided to rework it for this. We remixed it, we remastered it. We found some previously unreleased tracks from Michael Brecker, who played sax on it. So it was quite a thrill to put it out. It's also on the record. I mean, the theme of Stretching Outside the Box is stretching. So, like, if you go through the series of CDs, and some of them, the songs are shorter and there's not a lot of soloing. These are longer and there's a lot of stretching out.
Most everybody probably knows, but when you say stretching, or you made these songs so they were stretching out, obviously you're extending choruses, but explain what that means to young drummers who might not know. Well, how do you stretch a song?
Yeah, well, see, stretching out basically comes from the jazz, world, and the whole idea of, pop music when I was growing up, 3-minute songs, there might be a 4-bar solo interlude. Stretching is where you take a solo and you just keep going and keep going. Like when some of our gigs, I might solo for a long period of time, then I might give it to the drummer to solo, then I might trade 4s with the drummer. And stretching, I guess, is another word for just ad-libbing and improvising, but the thing that I love about jazz, you know, and I grew up with rock. I grew up as a rock enthusiast, and I discovered jazz and found out that all musicians at heart love jazz. And, you know, the great Motown session drummers, all the great LA Wrecking Crew session musicians, everybody, at heart they were jazz musicians. And the thing about jazz is, you know, I'll just say this, you know, you've got classical music and you've got jazz. Classical music is written out, everything, the dynamics, the articulations, every single note. And the job there is to reproduce it. It's more of a reproductive thing. Jazz is something that's done on the fly, and you know, you're in the moment, you're listening, you're looking, you're emoting, you're having conversations, and not everybody gets it, but what I've seen is jazz performed well, people really, they get something out of it. And so growing up interested in jazz, my goal was to fuse jazz with rock and R&B and Latin music and really reach more and more people. So I feel that most of the places I've played, the people, even if they're not sophisticated jazz listeners, will actually enjoy just the feeling, the energy, and they'll get kind of pulled in and they'll go, oh, I didn't really like jazz, but I really like what I heard. So I think stretching is about the essence of jazz, just to stretch out, let it happen, have a dialogue. And hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate some of this stuff in the future when we do some of our educational shows, you know, and show what we're talking about, just to have a dialogue, trade forwards with the drummer, say, and you don't know what you're going to play, but you hear the other person play, and then now you're going to play back, you know. It never fails.
So what do you have on the agenda now?
Well, I want to ask you a question first.
That's on your agenda, okay.
Did you did know Tony Williams, right?
Yes, of course.
And did you get to see him play the drums by himself?
Way before my life as a manufacturer, I saw him play about 2 weeks into Miles. There was a club in town called the LeGrand Theater. Maybe it was even before your time. I don't remember the LeGrand. It was an after-hours spot. So I was playing clubs, so I got off at 1:30. They got off wherever they were playing their gig at 1:30. Might have been at Shelley's or maybe even the Lighthouse. And then on Saturday, these touring bands, jazz bands that would come in, they would play a 3 to 5 o'clock set at this LeGrand Theater. So, of course, I had to go over there right away. So it was, and he was fresh with Miles, and we're about the same age. And talk about, you know, an eye-opening experience. You're practicing, you're 17 years old, 18, you know, you're getting, you know, you're thinking you're doing pretty good. And then you go see a 17-year-old kid playing with Miles Davis. Like, what the hell has he been eating? You know,
he was that young?
He was I think 17 when he was with Miles. Yeah, we were both the same age. So I saw him back in those years, and I admired him always as a drummer. Big thing that I always used to have students listen to was the ride cymbal, because that was his signature and the way he played it. A little different than previous drummers who had been with Miles. I was a huge Jimmy Cobb fan also, major, because Jimmy was, when I was really playing along to all those records,
yeah.
You know, I was playing along to Jimmy Cobb, which was before Philly Joe.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your question again? Yes, I knew. Yes, I knew Tony, and I knew him well because he played DW drums for many years.
That's what I thought you had a relationship with him.
Yeah.
When we did the video, the tribute to Tony, we put some footage in there of him playing a drum solo by himself, and it's just very musical. It's just, you mentioned earlier in the conversation about drum solos, and you know, the musical drum solos are so wonderful. You know, I think Art Blakey, you know, he had that thing where I love the way he would tighten up the head, the signature things like that. And I was at one of the very few Elvin Jones clinics ever done. I don't know how many he did, but I was at one in Anaheim at, I think it was PAS. I had done a clinic with Greg Bissonette before, and then Elvin came in afterwards, and he spent the whole time talking stories, and then he was playing the ride. He just played by himself, and just listening to him ride the cymbal, it swung, you know. And so that's the other message to anybody that's young and aspiring. It's not what you play, it's how you play it. you know, and
say that again. That's really important.
it's not what you play, it's how you play it.
And define the subtleties of the difference between that.
Well, you know, ting 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 ting, or ding 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 ding. I mean, just
the feel of what you're playing, not just what you're playing, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, and it comes from the heart. It comes from the body. It's alive. We're gonna be demonstrating this stuff in our future stuff, and I'm very excited about being able to, share some of the stuff I've learned over the years. Because what I'm realizing now, as you know, because we talk about this, like, so I recorded this song Rainbow Seeker with Steve Jordan. You know, great recording, great drummer and everything. But I'm playing it in a live situation with somebody else, and so I have to work with them, to get them to give me similar kind of a groove or performance. And it's like, and that's the other thing I've noticed, is that just because I work with all these really great guys, I can't have an attitude, that's one of the things I've noticed, is that it can be easy to say, well, so-and-so played it on the record like this. And it's like, there's a big spectrum, and every musician has something to say. And there's guys out there, and probably some that may be watching now, that have just as much to say as the most famous drummer, but haven't had that fame yet. So, I have seen a lot of people come from being unknown to becoming very famous, and so it's a real thrill to see that happen. When we're talking about all this stuff, I think the key is you have the desire to make music, and you have chops, and you have talent, and then to be creative with that. And once again, we talked about the drums holding down the fort. What that means is not just keeping time, but just giving a foundation for the other musicians to feel good. Make the other musicians feel good. Make them want to play. Make the singer want to sing. Make the guitar player want to take a solo.
Make the audience want to dance.
There you go.
Then you got the whole package. And you do that so well. I thank you so much for joining me here today. People can get all of this great content at...
Well, you can go to davidgarfield.com for a physical product, or you go to any streaming, Apple Music, Spotify, just put in my name. And we have a YouTube channel, Creechy Records at YouTube. So we definitely hope that you enjoy the music. And Don, thank you for supporting us, in many ways for many decades, and encouraging us to do what we do. This is our best work yet, and the set is 6 CDs, and as we discussed, it's a kind of a who's who of everybody, and all the instruments and vocalists and engineers and everything. So
go on to drumchannel.com and just search David Garfield, and you're going to find a couple of great shows that he has that you've done with us here on Drum Channel that are very educational also. David, thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you, Don.
We'll see you soon, as we're getting into more exciting things that we'll tell you about as soon as we get it happening. Thank you again for joining us, David. And you join us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And we'll see you next week. And we'll see you very soon.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, everybody.